We want to begin with the American on trial for murder in Italy, Amanda Knox. She's getting set to take the stand in her own defense while a new picture of her murdered roommate emerges. NBC's Jim Maceda has this story, and a good morning to you, Jim.
Good morning, Aaron. Well, with so much of the focus of this murder trial on American student Amanda Knox, the spotlight has turned onto the victim, Meredith Kercher, her family, and even an eerie cameo appearance by Meredith herself. Inside the Italian courtroom, Amanda Knox, the exchange student from Seattle accused of murdering her housemate, looked tired, as if she knew how difficult this day's session would be. For the first time, it was Kercher's family who gave evidence, part of a parallel civil case in which the family is seeking about $30 million in damages. Kercher's mother, Arlene, fought back tears as she described to the jurors the horror of her daughter's murder. It's not just her death, she said. It's the nature of it, the brutality, the violence, and the great sorrow it brought for everyone. It was such a shock. Kercher, a British exchange student, was found half naked in the house she shared with Amanda, strangled, her throat slit in what prosecutors call a drug-induced sex game gone awry. When asked if Meredith would have fought for her life, her sister Stephanie replied, 110% yes. She would have defended herself. Physically, she was very strong and would have fought to the end. John, her father, spoke as well, and in a British newspaper recalled the exact moment he learned he had lost a daughter. I dropped the phone. I don't believe it and think there must be a mistake, but I know it's probably true. I can't cry. I'm numb with shock. And in a bizarre twist, even Meredith Kercher herself came back to life in a music video by British singer Christian Leontiou, made in 2007, just weeks before her brutal death, and now released by her family. Their appearance in court was meant, they say, to be a tribute to Meredith, one which reportedly moved Amanda Knox to tears as well. Now the spotlight will swing back onto Amanda Knox, who later this week will finally give her own evidence, plead her innocence, and face what is expected to be a grilling cross-examination. Aaron?
Jim Maceda, thanks very much. And Dan Abrams is NBC's chief legal analyst, joins us this morning. Obviously, we want to talk about Amanda's potential testimony, but what we were just hearing about there, the family of Meredith, does that testimony mean anything? Obviously, it was more, shall we say, emotional than you'd expect here.
You hear them talking about the fact that she would have fought. Well, how helpful is that actually, the idea that she was a fighter and that she would have fought off her attackers? The reality is here that the criminal and the civil cases have effectively been combined, something that never would happen here in the United States. So the family now gets access to all sorts of information they might not have gotten if they were not part of the case. Meaning, if it was just the criminal case, the family might not have been able to testify. They might not be able to have access to documents and information that only the lawyers can have in Italy. Now that they've combined the cases, this allows the family to be uniquely involved in the case and allows them to talk about her as a person, something which here would be viewed as far too prejudicial in a criminal case.
Now, what about what's next? We're going to have Amanda Knox herself testifying. Is this something that could move the case in one direction or another?
Absolutely. When a defendant testifies, it's often a make or break moment. I mean, you can talk about DNA evidence, which is very significant, particularly in this case. You can talk about physical evidence. You can talk about evidence with regard to phone records, etc. But when the defendant testifies, it becomes absolutely crucial in the case.
And she could be emotional because they just said she was crying there when she saw the YouTube video of her roommate.
That's right. And she's going to be, doing it in Italian, which is interesting because she'd gone to Italy to learn Italian. Her Italian is now good enough that she's going to be testifying in Italian, which is interesting. But also, there's a different set of rules that apply to a defendant who testifies. First of all, she does not have to take an oath. Basically, she's expected to be advocating for herself. She can refuse to answer certain questions. Even though she's going to be cross-examined, she can say, I don't want to answer that question. Now, that can hurt her in terms of her credibility, but different set of rules for a defendant who testifies in Italy.
So how long is this going to drag on? I mean, the original crime happened almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, this has been a very long proceeding, and it's expected to continue for some time. But remember, this has been a very methodical case. I mean, they've already gone through the physical evidence, very important DNA evidence, which the prosecutors say shows, for example, a mixture of the defendant, Amanda Knox's DNA, and the victims. And they say, wait a second, how else could this have happened? The defense says, well, wait, there may have been contamination. We don't necessarily agree with some of the findings that the prosecution has introduced. That's been a big battle now for months. Now we're finally getting to the family of Meredith Kercher and now Amanda Knox herself.
One thing I really wanted to ask you about was, obviously we know that this was a very gruesome death, and there were stab wounds. That was what people assumed originally was what she died from, but now they're saying no, it was strangulation, and that may change the whole concept of whether this could be put off as an accident, right?
Yeah,
or whether it was intentional?
Good question. Yeah, the coroner has testified about suffocation being the cause of death here, and what the prosecutors would say is that shows you that this was an intentional death, which is you've got stab wounds and someone or some people who wanted to make sure that she died. And they say this eliminates the possibility of an accidental death. Again, the prosecutors say this shows why they've charged her the way they have.
All right. Well, Dan Abrams, thank you very much. And everyone will be listening to what Amanda has to say in that testimony. Now.